Marijuana, which is often called by its scientific name, cannabis sativa, contains a psychoactive compound known as tetrahydrocannabinol, or, THC for short. When someone uses marijuana, THC interacts with the brain's endocannabinoid system, which is this complex network of receptors that helps regulate things like mood, memory, appetite, and pain sensation. This interaction is actually what causes the characteristic high that people associate with marijuana use. Once THC enters the bloodstream, it quickly travels to the brain and binds to cannabinoid receptors. This process disrupts the normal functioning of neurotransmitters, which are the chemical messengers that let brain cells communicate with each other. The effects of this disruption can really vary, depending on the person, the strength of the marijuana, and even the way it's consumed. Common effects include a sense of relaxation and euphoria. And honestly, you might notice altered sensory perception. Some folks experience heightened sensitivity to sights, sounds, and tastes. But it's not all positive. Marijuana use can also lead to negative side effects, like anxiety, paranoia, and impaired coordination. Another important thing to mention is THC's impact on short-term memory, which is pretty well documented. The hippocampus, a part of the brain that's crucial for forming memories, is packed with cannabinoid receptors. When THC disrupts activity in the hippocampus, it can make it harder to form new memories or recall recent events while under the influence. This kind of impairment can be especially problematic in situations that require focus and attention, like driving or operating machinery. The question of whether marijuana is addictive is, well, still a subject of ongoing debate. While it's true that marijuana doesn't have the same addictive potential as something like heroin or cocaine, it's not really accurate to say it isn't addictive at all. Like any substance that changes brain chemistry, marijuana can lead to dependence, though usually to a lesser degree than some other drugs. It's important to make a distinction between physical dependence and psychological dependence. Physical dependence happens when the body gets used to having a substance around and starts to experience withdrawal symptoms if it's suddenly gone. On the other hand, psychological dependence is more about cravings and feeling like you need the substance to function normally. While marijuana withdrawal is usually less severe than what you'd see with opioids or alcohol, it can still show up as media group, person tossing and turning in bed, frustrated adult sitting on couch, young adult looking anxious or irritable at home at stock at distribute_equally, irritability, anxiety, trouble sleeping, and a decreased appetite. These symptoms are typically mild and tend to go away within a few days or weeks after stopping marijuana use. Psychological dependence, though, can be a bit more persistent. Regular users might find themselves craving the drug's effects, experiencing mood changes, and having a tough time controlling their use. This is especially true for people who start using marijuana heavily during adolescence, since their developing brains are more vulnerable to the drug's effects. The health implications of marijuana use are honestly pretty complex and multifaceted. Like with any substance, marijuana isn't without risks, especially when it's used heavily or over a long period. Still, it's important to keep a balanced perspective and not exaggerate these risks. One of the most common concerns is the potential for lung damage from smoking marijuana. While it's true that inhaling any kind of smoke can irritate your lungs, studies have shown that marijuana smoke isn't as harmful to lung health as tobacco smoke. In fact, a landmark 20-year study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that marijuana use, even heavy use, wasn't linked to a higher risk of lung cancer or respiratory disease. Another concern is how marijuana might affect the immune system. THC has been shown to suppress the immune system to some extent, which could, at least in theory, make users more vulnerable to infections. But studies on this have been mixed. And honestly, more research is needed to figure out the true impact of marijuana on immunity. Perhaps the most serious concern is the risk of psychosis, especially in people who are genetically predisposed to mental illness. Marijuana use has been linked to a higher risk of developing psychosis and schizophrenia for those with a family history of these conditions. The legal status of marijuana has, been the subject of intense debate for decades. While alcohol and tobacco, both substances with well-documented harms, are legal for adult use, marijuana is still illegal in many parts of the world. This difference has led a lot of people to question the reasoning behind marijuana prohibition. Alcohol, in particular, poses some serious risks to public health. Binge drinking, which is defined as 4 or more drinks for women and 5 or more drinks for men within a 2-hour period, is a major public health issue. It's responsible for thousands of deaths each year and costs billions of dollars in healthcare, lost productivity, and law enforcement. Interestingly, studies have shown that marijuana use isn't linked to a higher risk of death, even after accounting for factors like age, gender, and tobacco use. In fact, some research has even suggested that moderate marijuana use may be associated with a reduced risk of death from certain causes. Given all this scientific evidence, maybe it's time to reconsider the legal status of marijuana. Regulating and taxing marijuana, just like we do with alcohol and tobacco, would allow for better control over its production and distribution, generate tax revenue, and help reduce the harms tied to the black market. By taking a more sensible and evidence-based approach to marijuana policy, we can promote public health, reduce crime, and make sure adults have the freedom to make informed choices about their own bodies and minds.